and gentlemen, in the red corner, hailing from the state of Nevada, representing the Steam and Wise Guys, it's the always feared Vegas Odds Maker! And in the blue corner, the crowd favorite from South Florida, Marc Winning Picks Lawrence! And now, let's get it on!
Against the spread, Winning Picks with Marc Lawrence.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back once again. This is Marc Lawrence along with Victor King. A week before Thanksgiving, we're getting ready for that big turkey next week. We've got a lot of football action on tap this week as we go against the spread on this week's college and pro football cards. And with that, as always, I want to welcome in our co-host Victor King from King Creole Sports. And Victor, have you got your turkey bird all picked out yet?
We're definitely getting ready for the Thanksgiving holiday, Mark. You'll have to bear with me a little bit. I got a little bit of a virus or something, congestion, a little bit of nausea in the stomach. I think we may have something going on in terms of a virus, maybe in the King household. I know my wife Sandy's under the weather, and of course her son Bobby as well. So bear with me a little bit. We'll get over it. I might cough during the podcast. I might blow my nose or something, but we'll get over it. I'll say this. It doesn't help that we pretty much had a wipeout weekend for our King Creole service as well, to add to the, pain and sickness. Now, we did hit our highest rated play of the weekend, which was over the total in the Detroit to Chicago Bears game, but everything else was pretty bad both on Saturday and Sunday. So, hey, we'll get over it. We got a holiday coming up. Someone who did not let last weekend affect them was Marc Lawrence, who had that great comeback weekend on Saturday and Sunday. Let me see here. Marc's late phone service, 3-1 on Saturday, 2-1 on Sunday. He also went a perfect 2-0 with the best bets, the 4-star college game of the week, which was Arkansas, who hung in there and covered that number in that game. So the best bet college football game of the week, Arkansas, very nicely done. And of course, Marc had a big one in the NFL last week, the Arizona Cardinals, for his revenge game of the year. And Marc, when we were talking about that game last Friday, when you released it, and the fact that you may not have your starting quarterback in that game, Kyler Murray, you didn't seem too fazed. And you know what? You and I were tweeting back and forth during that Cardinals-Rams game, and we were both saying, there are times when the Cardinals' offense seems much more efficient with Colt McCoy than with Kyler Murray. So, again, well done. Great for sticking to your guns in that game and bringing home that outright underdog win on the Arizona Cardinals. But with that said, I do got to pass on my condolences to Marc. Marc's sister passed away yesterday on Tuesday. We're very, very sorry to hear that. I know she was under the weather. I know she was ailing. It does not make things better at all. And it looks like Marc has to make funeral arrangements now during the middle of a football season. And again, Marc, our condolences to you and to Colleen as well for that tragic passing of your sister.
Well, very, very much appreciated, Victor. Thank you. That means a lot to me. And we will, in fact, dedicate this show to my sister. How about that?
I love it.
There we go. That's what we're going to do. Rolling the tape back a little bit, you mentioned about those wins last week. Using in both games, by the way, Arkansas and the Big Plant Arizona backup quarterbacks, which kind of goes to that theory that I love talking about and love implementing, and that's whenever a star quarterback is out for the first game, backup quarterback does tend to come in and the team rallies around him. So it checked both boxes last week. So good way it worked out for us that week, and we'll thank the football gods for those particular results. On to the college football card this weekend, Victor, and we noticed the college football poll rankings. Not much shook up in the poll rankings this week. We still have 4 undefeated teams, and there also happen to be the top 4 ranked teams in the poll, which they should be: Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and TCU. Also inside the midweek alert, as I like to hit on, there are only 2 remaining teams in college football this year that have won the yards in every game they played. We lost one last week. That was Illinois, finally got beat in the stats. Georgia and Michigan are the 2 guys left for that battle of King of the Hill for the undefeated in the stats football teams this year. 3 teams in college football this year that are winning the yards over 200 yards every game. The same 3 guys as last week, Georgia, Michigan, and Ohio State. If that rings a common thread, it should, because we should likely see or could see all 3 of these teams in the college football playoff. A lot depends upon who loses that Michigan-Ohio State game next week, how bad they lose the football game, and how the other one-loss teams are faring along the way. We're watching teams like Tennessee playing for a lot of style points right now. And we've got other one-loss teams in the Pac-12 in Oregon and Southern Cal who could also likely be playing with a lot of style points, so forth and whatnot. So a lot of that's going to be determined here this week and obviously next week for Thanksgiving weekend. One other thought, Victor, before I pass it on to you. Usually Thanksgiving, the way we map things out, in putting our newsletter together this week, it was just a monster job doing just that, not only because of the passing of my sister, but also because there are an abundance of college football teams, 64 matchups in college football this week, and it kept us up burning the midnight oil for that newsletter on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. But usually on Thanksgiving week, that pares down a little bit, okay, because the season's end, there's bye weeks, everything and so forth and whatnot. So I'm looking forward to next week's newsletter. I'm mapping out the schedule. What do I see? 62 games on the football next week. So we're not going to be anything short of some excitement, at least on the college football scene, come next week. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you and get your thoughts on what you saw on the college football card last week.
Well, Mark, we have to first congratulate the 5 teams in college football that have covered the spread in 80% or more of their games this season, even though they lost last week and shocked us a little bit. Tulane Green Wave, Oregon State, Tennessee, all 8-2 ATS on the year. TCU 8-1-1. But forget that. There's one team that actually has 9 ATS wins this year, and they deserve some congratulations. And that's the Connecticut Huskies, who are 9-2 against the spread on the year. A great job by Jim Mora. The Huskies are now bowl eligible, 6 wins on the season. Not bad for a team that's only averaging 20 points per game. But in terms of ATS wins, it's the Connecticut Huskies who are actually kings in college football. Can you believe it?
The lead dog, the Connecticut Huskies.
Definitely. Mark, when it comes to the college football playoff rankings, a lot of people ask what makes a good resume. And here's at least one person's opinion to make a good resume in terms of the actual playoff. You got to have at least 1 win against a very, very good to great opponent. Maybe one of those teams in the top 10% of the FBS teams to prove that you can play with the best of the best. You got to have 3 or more wins against good teams who are maybe in the top 1/3 of FBS to prove that you can survive the week in, week out grind. You're probably going to need 2 or more wins in true road games to show you can go into a hostile environment and hold your own. So that does leave some of the question in the SEC conference. And if you add those 3 things up, and if you kind of package them together, well, you're covering basically the first 8 out of 9 teams that are in the college football rankings. But the 9th team, that'd actually be the Washington Huskies, who check in at a less than exciting number 17 in this week's rankings, behind 4 other Pac-12 teams, including 2-loss Utah, 2-loss UCLA, as well as 2-loss Oregon, who's ranked 5 spots higher than Washington, despite losing last week to Washington. So, there you have it. The Pac-12, it's essentially a 5-team stalemate right now. So a lot can change naturally but there's really very little case for Washington as the fourth of those 5 teams, and we'll be simply looking at the credits rather than the debits on the Huskies' resume. There's actually a fairly strong for increasing their status a little bit.
I agree with that, Victor. They were one of the plays we used last week, and we saw in their numbers, people saw all they saw were 3 losses and a team that maybe was going downhill after their great start, but very, very well-coached football team. Caleb DeBoer, a quarterback that might be the best quarterback in that conference. I know Caleb Williams gets all the ink, but Michael Penix Jr., he really lights things up for that football program here. And they're going to be a team that nobody's going to want to play in the college bowl games. I can assure you that. If they land a New Year's Day 6 bowl game, kudos to them, because I think they will be very well deserving of something just like that. Let's move over now, Victor, if we may, to the NFL side of the football. And last week, we saw the #1 undefeated Philadelphia Eagles finally bite the dust, if you will. And it was rather almost inevitable when you find a football team going this deep into the NFL football season to stay undefeated. And when you find those losses, they generally come against division opponents, because the division opponent really comes with fire in their eyes. To find an undefeated team inside their division, you get their best effort. And we got their best effort from Washington in that football game Monday night, a football team that's a little bit under the radar here. And I just loved seeing Ron Rivera in the post-game conference after the football game. He was like next to speechless for having accomplished what they just did. And a great job for the Washington Commanders in that football game. I don't know if I referred to them the Redskins or not, but the Washington Commanders in that football game. And it was nice to see Philadelphia get knocked off their perch. Not that I'm anti-Philadelphia at all. I love the Philadelphia, and I love what the Eagles are doing. But I wasn't really all that surprised to see that result happen here. And we'll see exactly how they fare coming out of a football game like that. Now, that wasn't an embarrassment loss for the Eagles by any means. There were some other games I thought that were a little bit teams more embarrassed. Our good friend, the Texas Tornado, Steve Pratt from Dallas, he nominates the Dallas Cowboys as being his most embarrassed team on the football card this week, after that faux pas that they had in Minnesota, blowing that 14-point lead. They were 195-0. with 14-point lead going into the fourth quarter when they choked that away. So obviously that would be embarrassment for Dallas in a game like this. But I got to also nominate 2 other teams, Victor, for most embarrassed teams. And I might have to put the Buffalo Bills on that list. I think they're rather embarrassed, if you will, back-to-back losses coming in here right now. Losing to the New York Jets, if you will, a football team that they were double-digit favorites, my goodness, against. So we'll see what they have in their game plan here this week when they take on the Cleveland Browns. And another team I would nominate would again be the perpetual nominee, the Las Vegas Raiders, who continue to embarrass themselves each and every week throughout the football season. They had a matchup of a train wreck of a game last week, because not only are the Raiders a train wreck, but so too were the Indianapolis Colts coming into the football game. New coach, new offensive coordinator, a rebirth of a quarterback who they had given up on and said, hey, we're going to start you. And I think that might have been part of a game plan too, by the way, just to make that announcement about Matt Ryan and then get rid of the coach and bring Matt Ryan back. But we'll never know, because no NFL owner will ever admit that. But I got to nominate the Las Vegas Raiders as being one of those most embarrassed teams again this week. Well, your take on that particular subject, if you want to expound on that, Victor, great. Otherwise, what else did you see in the NFL last week?
Well, I'll tell you, King's best friend would definitely agree with you in terms of the Raiders being the most embarrassed team. And that's our boy Tuco, who had the Raiders score over 23 points in that home against the Colts. And poor Tuco finished up 15 yards short. What were the Raiders down to the Colts' 15-yard line at the end of the game and turned it over on downs. So my dog Tuco would definitely agree with you on that. In terms of most embarrassed team, yeah, you can make a case for the Buffalo Bills giving up that double-digit second-half lead, and the fact that, what is this now? Is this 3 games in a row in which Allen has thrown 2 interceptions in a game, including one that was picked off in the end zone at the end of the game? So you can definitely, make a case for Buffalo, that's for sure. What would be potentially cool would be that if a Vikings-Bills Super Bowl rematch, not only would be a rematch of the NFL Game of the Year here in 2022, it would probably be one of the more surreal Super Bowls of all time and historic even before the kickoff, because it basically means that one of the two franchises would have no choice but to actually win a Super Bowl, right? Minnesota and Buffalo. One more team I want to throw in there, and this is my year-to-date most embarrassed team, and you cashed some big money playing against them last week, and it's the Super Bowl champion LA Rams. In their game against Arizona, they had only 250 total offensive yards. They lost by double digits, favored by more than a field goal, and they are the worst NFL ATS team on the season at 2-6-1 ATS. That's my vote for probably year-to-date most embarrassed team, the LA Rams.
Well, the Rams are also cap struck, Victor, if you will. They paid so many big dollar contracts to maybe 10 players that draw mega contracts. They can't go anywhere. They can't make moves. They're cap struck. This football team is going to be down not only the rest of this year, but next year as well. So it's kind of sad to see you go from the top of the mountain down to the bottom of the pile. But that's what's happening with the Rams this year. And we're seeing it not only on the playing field, but also statistically as a handicapper, because they can't run the football a lick. Then you throw in the loss of Cooper Kupp. My goodness, the most dynamic offensive player in the league. He's gone. Matthew Stafford, their quarterback, he's in concussion protocol. It's a mess right now in Los Angeles, and that's one of the reasons we picked on and against them with the Cardinals for our big revenge play last week in the National Football League. Also, taking a look at what you mentioned about the Buffalo Bills and losing that game, that loss, Victor, in the current playoff picture, they are now the number 6 seed in the AFC. They were number 2 all season long, all number 1 even ahead of Kansas City at a point.
Right.
But they fall now in the AFC East standings. They trail Miami, if you will. Take a look at that playoff picture coming in this weekend. The number 1 seeds, Kansas City and Philadelphia, getting to be the same old song. Number 2, Miami, the aforementioned Dolphins, and the Minnesota Vikings. Number 3, Tennessee and Seattle, even the loss that Seattle incurred over in Germany. And what a great football game that was, and what a great environment that was. I'm going to talk to you about that in just a moment. They're still number 3, the Seattle Seahawks. Number 4, the Baltimore Ravens and the Tampa Bay Bucks. Number 5, the Jets and the Giants, New York's finest, are coming in at the number 5 seeds. Number 6, Buffalo, as I mentioned, tumbles down to number 6, along with Dallas, who tumbles down to number 6. And the number 7 and final seeds would be Baltimore and San Francisco. And just to go full circle here, Victor, I mentioned that game with Seattle and Germany, and what a delight it was watching that football game. I saw a reinvigorated Tom Brady in that football contest there. He just ate up the environment there, the crowd, everybody singing to John Denver's
Country Roads.
Yeah, but what blew my mind, Victor, is it was in Germany and they're singing in English words. You know,
I had goosebumps when they were singing that song. It was fantastic.
It was great. It was absolutely terrific, and what a case they made. I heard over 3 million ticket requests for that football game, for that contest. That's how popular the sport is in Germany here. So we're going to see a lot more games coming up in Germany here real soon, if not a franchise, when they unveil this new international division in the National Football League. But it was really quite a sight to see. And I know you loved it too, Victor. I know you're of German heritage, and to see that crowd be like that had to be a good thumbs up feeling.
That was fantastic. And also, you know, they're in talks now to expand that international series into potentially France and into Spain as well. And you mentioned the fact that the tickets for this game here in Munich sold out in about 10 minutes when they went online. It's just unbelievable.
Whoa. Scalper's paradise in Germany for the National Football League, but really quite a nice scene to see. You're tuned in to Mark Lawrence Against the Spread, the nation's most popular sports handicapping talk show, our podcast and our video cast. If you're watching us, terrific. If you're listening, all much better. We enjoy your comfort and your support. With that, Victor, let's move it over now to our college football game of the week, if we may. And looking at the college football card this week, I think we've got a beauty on tap this week. We're going to go to the Pac-12 conference between two football teams that are ranked in all the polls. That's the Utah Utes taking on the Oregon Ducks. I think this is going to be one heck of a football game this Saturday. Victor, how do you see the Utes and the Ducks faring on Saturday?
Okay, quick timeout here for about 10 seconds, Greg. I got to punch up my Microsoft Word document here, and then I'll count me back down again.
Okay.
Okay, I'll count down. I'll go like a 3, 2, 1, and then I'll get into the game. I'm gonna go 3, 2, 1. You got that right, Mike. We are heading to the Pac-12 Conference, a late night West Coaster in the Pac-12 Conference. This game nationally televised on ESPN TV, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Utah Utes, Oregon Ducks, a very, very big game in the Pac-12 North Division. As far as the point spread goes, Oregon opened up as a 3-point favorite. That's where they are as we record the podcast. The line has not moved. It's a tight 3-point line in this particular game. As far as the over-under goes, it opened at 62 points. It's gone up a full point, right at 63.0 as we speak. And let's see here. The Utah Utes are 5-5 over-under team on the season. Their average line, 57.4. Average combined points, 59.2. Average margin, plus 1.8. So they've still actually averaged more into the over range, despite the fact that they are 5-5. Oregon, we know what we're getting there, 70% over team on the season. The Ducks are 7-3 over under. Their average line, 63.4. Average combined points, 69.6. And the average Duck game has gone over by almost a full touchdown, plus 6.2 points per game. We're getting some big-time offense in this one, that is for sure. Utah comes in number 12 scoring offense on the season. They're averaging 39.3. Oregon, number 4 scoring offense, 42.2 is what the Ducks average on offense this season. In terms of yards per game, we've got two teams who are actually close to being 500-yard offenses. That's definitely what you get with Oregon. They're averaging 528 yards per game. They're the number 2 offense behind Tennessee on the season. And Utah, not far behind. They're number 22 at 464 offensive yards per game. Yes, they do have the 22nd ranked defense this year. However, the Ducks' defensive numbers are down or up. If you want to compare that this year, they are now number 91 in total defense for Oregon. They're allowing almost 400 yards per game. And Oregon is actually playing with double revenge in this game. I'm sure Marc will have something to say about that. They lost in the regular season to the Utes 38-7 last year. Then they lost in the rematch, which was the Pac-12 championship game, 38-10. So in terms of actual over-under streaks, Utah is coming in off 3 straight unders in a row. Oregon's gone under in each of their last 2 games. It looks like the value in this one is actually on the over. And as far as the quarterbacks go, it does not get any better than this. It looks like we're preparing for a high-scoring Pac-12 shootout. We know Bo Nix, of course, for Oregon. He transferred from Georgia. He has looked sharp all season long. He's ranked as the number 3 quarterback in QBR rating for the season. The only 2 guys that are ahead of him are C.J. Stroud of Ohio State and Hendon Hooker of Tennessee. So a great year from Bo Nix. And, Cameron Rising of the Utes is not far behind either. He's the number 5 quarterback in QBR rating. So we got 2 of the top 5 quarterbacks in all of college football going at it on Saturday night with an over-under line that's manageable. This is not one of those high 60s, low 70s. It's a fairly low over-under line for a Pac-12 games at 63.0. Don't forget the weather can always be an issue in Pac-12 games, particularly the games that are played up in the Pacific Northwest. And my favorite weather app is an app called weatherstem.com. And that's the word weather, STEM, STEM.com. They cover all college football games only. They give you a stadium's elevation, the almanac averages, a complete weather breakdown, wind reports, chances of precipitation, humidity, cloud cover. With that said, we're looking good in this one. When I do check the folks there at weatherstem.com, the weather report for game time in Eugene is, it's going to be cold, 33 degrees. That's fine. Winds only 1 mile an hour, only a 7% chance of rain. So, based on the spread and the over-under line, the implied score in this game is Oregon 33, Utah 30. With a spread so low, only 3 points, the odds are much higher on this game's potentially going into overtime. And again, like I said last week, you know what they say about college football overtimes? It's where unders go to die. Our database models project a final score of somewhere about 38 to 34. Maybe we get into the 70s, the low 70s. Either way, this looks like a fun game to watch. We got a great quarterback duel, and we'll be going over the total in the Utah-Oregon game.
Victor likes the value to the over in this football game in that Saturday night special. I'll be watching this football game. I think, like Victor says, this is one of the best college football games I think we'll tune into this football season here. The Utah Utes are very, very highly thought of throughout the college football world here. They rank number 10 in all 3 of the current polls, that being the AP, the coaches, and the college football playoff poll. The Oregon Ducks are number 12 in 2 of those polls and number 13 in the coaches poll. So these teams are really relatively very close when it comes to the eyes of the coaches and the people voting on their strengths and weaknesses this football season. The one thing Utah does the best is when they are out on the conference road and they dress up as single-digit dogs. That's the role they'll be in here. They're perfect 5-0 to the spread the last 5 times they've been on the conference road taking single digits. Victor mentions also the fact that they beat the Ducks twice last year in the regular season and the Pac-12 title game. They beat them pretty good in that Pac-12 title game. Taking a good team out like Oregon 2 times in 1 year is really rather quite an accomplishment. Take a look at the Ducks coming into this game here. You have to figure that last week in that Washington game, they were probably looking ahead to this game. If for no other reason, they've had this game circled twice for those 2 revenge aspects that I just mentioned. In that game against Washington last week, they put up 592 yards in that home loss. That was a pretty impressive offensive performance by Oregon. They won the yards by 70 games. It was just a boneheaded call by their head coach when he opted to go for it in his own territory late in the game and didn't make it, and he gave the ball back to Washington. They proceeded to kick the field goal and win the football game. I can't believe the call I saw, but nonetheless, it was made and they lost the football contest. This is an Oregon football team that, if you look inside the stats, we talk about going inside the stats. They're 9-1 to the number this year inside the stats. What we do with those putting on the stats dogs is we played on them as dogs throughout the month of November in this particular role. There are 2 dogs in this week's college football card in this particular role. Now, they're not the dog here in this particular game, but they're still 9-1 against the spread in the stats this year. I also like the fact that, look at Oregon. They're 5-0 to the spread at home with revenge coming off a home loss. It's going all the way back to 1996. I'm going to stay at home with Oregon to look for them to get their revenge in this football game, if for no other reason. This football team is 23-1 straight up at home the last 24 games. And what was the one loss? Last week against Washington. I don't see this football team losing 2 football games in a row at home. I like the Oregon Ducks over Utah for my side in this big Pac-12 conference game on Saturday night. You're tuned in to Mark Lawrence Against the Spread, the nation's most popular sports handicapping talk show. And Victor, we've got a beauty on tap going in the NFL this particular week. We're going to go inside the division of the National Football League where every team owns a winning record. That's quite an accomplishment for the AFC East when the New England Patriots play host to the New York Jets. I think this will be a heck of a football game on Sunday, Victor. What do you think about this contest?
I'm excited to dig into this game, that is for sure, Mark. Before I do, let's talk about our newsletters, our Playbook newsletters. Midweek alert, totals tip sheet, Playbook newsletter. You see the headline for this week's newsletter, how the college football 5-star best bets have been cleaning up over the last month of play. And, Mark, we release the newsletters. The totals tip sheet comes out on Tuesday afternoons each week. The Playbook newsletter comes out on Tuesday evenings each week. We do that for you, for the customer, to get that information out as soon as you possibly can get it in your hands. Because the earlier you get it, the more opportunity you have to track the line moves, to shop for the best line, to do as much research as you possibly can before pulling the trigger. There is a reason that we put out the newsletter as early as we do. And of course, we work very, very hard on Tuesday, on Monday, and even on Sunday working on the Playbook newsletter. With most people enjoying their NFL Sunday at the bar, at the restaurant, at the casino, I need to be in my home base on Sundays. I need to be in my comfort zone. So, Sandy and I, we rarely go out on NFL Sundays. Again, I need to be in the comfort of my own home with the Red Zone channel on the big TV and our local couple of games on the smaller TVs. I got my computer in front of me. We've got the Playbook database in front of me, so we can be working on our newsletters while we're enjoying our NFL Sundays. And not only that, I don't like a lot of people coming over to the house to watch games on Sunday either. It's just our tight little inner circle, our family, Sandy, her sons. They're the only ones who are really invited over the King household on Sundays. So we get plenty of positive vibes. We're in our own controlled home environment. And not only that, but we get a bonus. And the bonus for the King household is the fact that we got the doggies. Any pet owner will tell you that the unconditional love you get from the doggies is it's a wonder. It really, really is. And I know between Tuco and Isabella, they reduce anxiety on a Sunday. B, they lower my blood pressure on what is already a very stressful day of the week as well. So that's how I approach Sundays, working on the newsletter at home. And this kind of takes us into a question that you can answer, Mark, and that is, we got one of these podcast questions who asks, what is Mark's usual procedure on a Sunday during the NFL? Mark, before we get into this Patriots-Jets game, how do you approach Sundays? What is your typical Sunday like in the NFL?
That's a great question, Victor, and I'm really glad you asked me. And believe me, we didn't talk about this, so I loved you throwing at me spur of the moment. I love that. I love doing that stuff. I was going to say at the King household, but before you got into the dog aspect of it, which I completely get and understand, I thought you were going to mention Sundays watching football and enjoying Sandy's paella, which is probably really terrific as well. But as far as my Sundays go in the national or on Sundays, what I find myself doing is every Sunday morning I get up, I download the stats, I hand log all the stats from every college football game that was played the day before into my stat and logbook. That takes about 4 hours to do that. And after I log those, and I log those, by the time I'm watching the NFL games on the Sunday Ticket on my DirecTV, watching the Red Zone channel, I get all that stuff ready for when I enter the lines into the database with Victor preps the database, sends it over to me. I get ready. I enter the lines for next week's game in the database, and I start firing away with the systems and angles that will be made available on this week's football card. I get all that ready. I have dinner that night. I go back and I start putting all those systems together with what I have statistically, what I just logged. And that's the marriage, and that's the beautiful point of handicapping is when you can marry statistics along with systems and angles and fundamentals, you have all of the best of all the handicapping world. So that's a Sunday for me in the Lawrence household, Victor. I'm going to throw it back to you and find out what, aside from being with the dogs and Sandy on Sunday, I'm going to turn it back to you and see what your thought is on this Jets-Patriots football game, if you will.
Well, the game with the Jets and Patriots, we are at, 38.5 right now. And in fact, the over-under line of this game opened at 39.5, and the line has moved in a downward direction. Most of the early action in the AFC East Division game is going low, but as the line goes low, I'm liking the over actually more and more in this particular game. Now, these two teams, the Patriots and the Jets, they just played each other 3 weeks ago in New York. The final score was 22-17. But with that said, the last three in this series played in New England have gone a perfect 3-0 to the over with a really nice high average. of 51.0 combined points per game. And the database highlight in regards to this particular game looks at same division games that have a low over-under line. And believe me, this line is on the low side. Here's something from the database that's actually gone 15-1 to the over. That's 15 overs, only one under in the last 7 years. And we're looking at game 2 or greater, same division home favorites of less than a touchdown. That's the Patriots. When the over-under line in the game is less than 40 points, these games have gone, again, 15-1 to the over. The fact that both of these teams are off their bye week is also actually a good sign for a higher than expected final score. Since 2006, 14 overs, only 2 unders, all NFL games when both teams are off their bye week, when the over-under line is less than 40. And since 2010, we've actually gone a 10-0 to the over, average margin plus 13.3 points per game. They've always been good overplays when both teams are coming in off their bye week, and the over-under line is in the mid to low side here. And I also ran a over-under query that's kind of division specific, and this has gone 10-0-1 over-under since 2015. Game 8 or greater, all AFC East division games in which the host is favored by greater than 3 and less than 14 points. And again, the over-under line is 45 or less. Again, these games that have gone 10-0-1 to the over. Now, of course, New England, they just held the Colts to only 3 points in their most recent game before the bye. So that gives us an 8-1-1 over-under situation, home favorites of a field goal or more after their bye week, who allowed 3 or less points in their last game. And, for the Jets, this is actually their 3rd straight division game in a row this week. And that plays right into a beautiful 8-0 over-under situation in our database over the last 5 years. And that's all underdogs playing in their 3rd straight division game in a row, again, with the over-under line at 44 or less points. All of a sudden, Gillette Stadium in Foxborough has been host to numerous recent shootouts dating back to last season. The Patriots are now 8-2 to the over in their last 10 home games, with a gaudy average of 48.4 combined points per game. Track the line move in this one. Follow the line move. When you see it reaching its lowest point, we are going to pull the trigger and play over the total. Jets and Patriots. I mean, it could still be a low 24-20, and the game would still go over by 6 points. So that's our play for this week, Mark. A lot of people going under. We're going the other way and playing over the total in this AFC East division game.
So as Victor goes over the total in that big football game on Sunday, let's take a look from the winning point spread side in the contest. First of all, at the New York Jets. And as we all know, the Jets have had their problems against New England. No question about that. They've dropped 21 of the last 20 in the series, including 13 losses in a row. But to that, I will say, none of those teams were of the caliber that this New York Jets football team is this year. That's a big, big difference in this football contest. It's all about Robert Saleh and what he's done with his program the last 2 years. And in fact, looking at his body of work for the Jets, Robert Saleh, with the Jets, when he's taken on an opponent that comes in off a win and cover their previous game, he's done it 7 times. He's won 4 of those games straight up and covered the spread 6 times. The Midweek Alert football newsletter, our statistical newsletter, chips in and reminds us that the New York Jets own both the better offense and defense in this football game. That's a rarity. You don't find that too often with the Jets and the Patriots in a matchup like that, where the Jets have the best in the football contest. New England checks in here, if you can believe it, last place in the AFC East with a winning record, but nonetheless last place in the AFC East. New England has held 2 of their last 4 opponents to season low yards, so they're playing good defense. And they've also played really, really rather well as single-digit favorites this year. They've been in 4 games where they've been installed as a single-digit favorite. They've won all 4 games and went 3-0-1 against the spread. The one hiccup that the database finds is that when they're at home off a bye week, they're just 1-10-1 against the spread are the New England Patriots. I'm going to side to the New York Jets in this football contest here, and this is a great little stat that I ran across this week. The New York Jets are top 10 scoring and overall defense this year. If they happen to finish the season in the top 10 in scoring and overall defense, it would be the first time in NFL football history that a team goes from last place in those two stats one year to top 10 the next year. That's how improved this New York Jets football team is this year. It's not a fluke. I'll take the points with the New York Jets for my side in this football game. And with that, let's hop out to Las Vegas now. We're going to check out on the Vegas vibe going on with Andy Iskoe in Vegas for one of our favorite segments in the show. Andy, welcome once again back to the show, and I hope all's going well for you in Vegas these days.
Thanks, Mark. Everything is going well out here other than the chilly, unseasonable weather that we've had, where we've had temperatures dip into the 30s in the overnight hours and reach highs in the low to mid 60s in the daylight hours. Almost makes you think I slept through Thanksgiving and Christmas, but fortunately I haven't, so we still have some good meals and family celebrations to look forward to, but the weather has some catching up to do.
Well, it'll turn, Andy, and I know it'll get a little crisp there, but between now and by the time the first of the new year rolls around. But keep that in mind when you're talking about the weather in Buffalo and Northeast this week when a monster snowstorm is supposed to hit. And we're going to see snowflakes on the football playing fields this year, telling us that it's football season in the NFL this year. So enjoy what you've got, Andy. It's, by comparison, really a pretty nice time to be in Vegas.
Yeah, that's very true. In fact, when I think about the first snow of the season, I think of like the game in Dallas on Thanksgiving Day, where I usually see the first snowflakes. We may see that again this year.
Well, Andy's he's accustomed to this, believe me, guys. I mean, he went to Ivy League guy, man. He went to Pennsylvania, so he knows all about frigid weather back east this time of the year. Andy, with that, it's contest time in Las Vegas going on here right now, and I'll be curious when we get down to the grand finale of the Survivor to see how everything's shaking out there. But if you would do us the honor and bring us up to speed about what's going on in the big contest in Las Vegas as we head into the week before Thanksgiving.
Sure, Mark. I'll start as I usually do by looking at the combination NFL and college football contest being run by the Golden Nugget. It's a contest where you pick 7 games a week. They do have basically every college game, every college side up and available, as well as NFL sides. No totals, there aren't any totals in any of these contests. And just go over the leaderboard. There's really no consensus because it's a limited number of selections and about 70 games from which contestants can choose each week. But what is surprising is that the leader in this contest is actually hitting below 67%. It's not unusual because of the plethora of college football contestants in the contest that we see a higher rate in this combination contest than we do usually in the NFL contest. But there is one contestant who is at 65.7%. That's 46 out of a possible 70 points. That's just good enough for a 1-point lead over another contestant. And we go down to the final paying places, which they pay 20 in ties. And right now, to be cashing in this contest, you would only need to be hitting, and I use only in quotes because it's not as easy as it sounds, 56.4% has you cashing. And actually, in the Golden Nugget contest, cash should be in quotes. You get your entry fee back if you finish 11th through 20th. Plus any ties. You make money if you finish 1st through 10th. Looking at the major contest, starting as we usually do with the Westgate Super Contest, the granddaddy of the football contest here in Las Vegas now in its I think it's about its 34th year, 35th year, going back to the old Las Vegas Hilton in the late 1980s. We chart the consensus plays, the top 5 plays each week. Each contestant makes 5 selections against a static point spread. And historically, folks have liked to follow what the overall consensus of the contestants are. Coming into the week, the top 5 results through the first 9 weeks, that's 45 selections. The top 5 picks had been 27-17 with 1 push, and that's 61.1% for the consensus. Very good year for the consensus. This past week, not quite as good a week as the consensus went 2-3. The two winning selections were the Steelers plus 1.5 at home against the Saints, and the Titans laying 2.5 in their home win and cover against the Denver Broncos. The losers this week, the top pick overall, the Bears laying 2.5 in their 1-point loss at home to Detroit. Cleveland plus 3.5. Competitive first half. They ended up getting blown out in the second half at Miami, and Seattle plus 2.5 in their game over in Germany. So 2-3 for the week brings the Super Contest Classic consensus to 29, 20, and 1. And again, 1 point for a point spread cover, half a point for a point spread push, 59.0% through the first 50 picks in this year's contest for the contestants. As far as the results go, 4 contestants are tied with 35.5 out of a possible 50 points through the first 10 weeks, and that's 71.0%. Super Contest pays the top 30 and ties, and right now the contestants who are in the final paying positions are at 66% with 33 points. 18 more just out of paying position at 65. So that's still a pretty good percentage for the contest, a little bit more than halfway into the season. Talk about the standings in the Super Contest Gold. That's the $5,000 entry fee winner take all contest. 80 entries this year, playing for one person who will collect $400,000 at the end of the season. The leader in this contest, actually a contestant tie at 34 out of 50 points at 68%. That's good enough for a 1.5 lead over one contestant in, well, I guess technically it's third place at 65%. Looking now at the other major contests that have come to be part of the handicapping and contest scene the last few years over at the Circa Hotel and Casino. The Circa Millions contest, which offers a $1 million first prize, pays the top 100 contestants. And it's a similar format to the Westgate Super Contest, 5 selections a week, and the consensus through the first 9 weeks of the 5 top selections at Circa, 24, 18, and 3. That's 56.7%, and their results almost mirrored identically the Westgate consensus, and to the extent that they were both 2 and 3. The two winners, the Steelers with their win over New Orleans, and the Titans with their win over the Denver Broncos. The losers were on Seattle, Chicago, and the Cleveland Browns for a 2 and 3 record, bringing the season to date record in the Circa Millions contest 26, 21, and 3, and that is 55%. 2 contestants are tied for the overall lead in the contest with 36.5 out of 50 points. That's 73.0%, followed by one contestant at 70.0%. This contest does pay the top 100 finishers, so there are 41 contestants for the last few payoff spots. That's 64% right now for contestants in the Circa contest to be in the money for the full season contest. Now, getting down to the contest to which you referred at the start of this, the Circa Survivor. That contest began with 6,133 entries. Entries through week 9, only 115 or 1.88% of the original field was still remaining. Of the 115 contestants or entries still alive, 86 advanced. The most popular selection, actually the top 3 top selections all advanced. 36 were on the Chiefs, 30 were on the 49ers, and 17 were on the Giants. Also 1 each on the Steelers, Dolphins, and Titans. The 29 contestants or entries that were eliminated involved 3 teams. 10 lost with the Raiders, 10 lost with the Eagles, 8 lost with the Bears, and 1 more. One contestant lost with the Saints. So 86 advanced. That means that of the 6133, 98.6% of the entries have been eliminated. That's 6,047 out of the 6,133. So 1.4% remain. And the last few weeks, I've been giving you a comparison to last year. And last year was the week when the field got trimmed significantly. There were only 173 of 4,080 entries alive after 10 weeks. They lost 500, I forget the exact numbers, over 500 entries in week 10 last season that went down. So at this point, 1.4% remain this year. That compares to 4.24% last year at this same time, 10 weeks into the season. And of course, we still have the two Thanksgiving weeks. They split it into two parts for the contest, as they do for the Christmas holiday. And haven't seen the prop yet, but I mentioned it last week. They're interested to see if there's going to be a prop as to will this contest go the full 20 weeks or the completion of the season as it did the first 2 years of this contest.
That's an interesting prop, especially with the nukes in there, picking twice Thanksgiving week and twice Christmas week. So that makes it a little bit intriguing, although the amount of entries that are alive this year are way down from where they were last year. I don't know which way I would go in that prop. What would you do, Andy?
I think, I don't know if we mentioned it last week, but I think we had talked about the one contestant who had been playing 6 entries
Yes.
and all 6 on the same team for the first 9 weeks or first 8 weeks, did the same thing last week and got eliminated when, well, I guess it was 2 weeks ago when Buffalo beat the New York Jets. I don't know how many contestants, individuals, still have multiple entries of the remaining 86. But I would think, depending upon what the price, if they priced it minus 110 each way, as far as the will it or won't it, I'd be more inclined to play the won't with just 86 entries remaining, because you still have 8 weeks remaining in the season, a lot of upsets, a lot of games late in the year. And of course, remember, you can only use a team once. So the contestants, the 86 who are still alive, those entries, they've used a total of 10 teams already. And there's 22 remaining, and a lot of those 22 may have very little, if anything, to play for over the final couple of weeks of the season. Rest starters, put in players for next year, etc. So with such a small field remaining, I'd be more inclined to think that we won't make it the full 20 weeks. I'd be happy if they did, because there's a $1 million bonus for someone who goes 20-0. If multiple people do, if they use that caveat. I think if they had not used the Bengals or the Rams all season, and I think it didn't take very long for people to not use the Rams anymore this year, that they get an extra $1 million or share it if it's more than one person, then they go perfect.
That's what I call sage advice from a sage expert in Las Vegas, Andy Iskoe. One of the things that I was taught early on, especially when it comes to prop betting, more so in Super Bowls, is that the public loves to bet yes and over in props, and the sharps bet the no's and the unders. So Andy, no surprise to me that he would say no to that particular prop, and for a lot of good reasons.
That plays along with the prop with the especially the totals, where games do not go under the total. They start under and they stay under unless they go over or until they go over. So you're always in a good shot early until it's that's a whole different topic. Why I don't like the fact that baseball games have to go the full 9 innings if a game has gone over the total after 7. That's a winner. The under is a loser. Unfortunately, the betting rules, at least in most places that I'm aware of, you get a refund if the game doesn't go at least 8.5 innings with the home team winning, or 9 innings or more if the visitor is winning.
So as Andy says, if you're betting the unders, the cake is baked before the game begins, guys. It's just a question whether or not it'll explode over by the end of the.
I love those food references.
Seriously, yeah, but someone left the cake out in the rain.
Thank you, MacArthur Park.
Yes, there we go. I love it, man. We're tying everything into the show. We're visiting with Andy Iskoe from TheLogicalApproach.com in Las Vegas, getting the update of the Vegas vibe and everything that's going on in Las Vegas this particular week. And Andy, if you would share with our listeners out there, a very popular segment on the show, some of the look-ahead lines that have emanated from Las Vegas, maybe particularly from the Superbook, those look-ahead lines that were either out before the season began or even last week, as opposed to what the lines will be this week.
As we get deeper and deeper into the season, we see much more of a variant from what teams were thought of prior to the actually start of training camp, because these lines, I believe, came out in July as training camps were about to open, and even to where they were 10 days prior to the games being played. I'll start with the Thursday night game, for example. Not a huge change other than with the total, actually. And of course, as Victor knows, there's been a predominance of unders this year. That continues. I think last week it was 50-50, so it's still 20-something games net below or with the unders this year. But with the Green Bay hosting Tennessee, prior to the start of the season, the Packers were 5.5-point home favorites in that game. Everyone thought Green Bay was going to, once again, almost by default, win the NFC North. And Tennessee, yeah, they were going to be a playoff team, but not the caliber of Green Bay. So Green Bay 5.5 made sense. When the line was posted prior to last week's games, the line was down to Green Bay -1. Then later in the day, it was reposted after Tennessee won their game against Denver, and Green Bay lost in overtime to Dallas. I'm sorry, Green Bay won in overtime against Dallas. The line was reposted at 1. Since then, action has come in on Green Bay, such that the Packers are now 3-point home favorites, moving a little bit more towards the summer line. But I mentioned the total in this game over the summer. When some places put up lines on all 18 weeks, but they only do it for sides. Westgate did it for both sides and totals, and the over the summer number for this game was 48. When it got reposted 10 days before this coming week's games, a full touchdown adjustment down to 41, reflecting the fact that overall the league has been lower scoring this year, and Green Bay specifically has had some difficulty. And you look at Tennessee's games this year, I know Victor knows the exact number, but they're averaging less than 40 total points, and we're 10 games into the season. I think there are 3 such teams. I know Tennessee and Denver, and I think there's one other team that's also below 40 total points in a game this year. Looking at some other games, I'll just mention this one. Bears at Falcons. Falcons were a 1-point favorite over the summer. Then they were adjusted 10 days before coming week's games to a 5-point home favorite. That's a huge adjustment. They've been bet back down to right in the middle of where the summer number and the 10-day number was. They're now favored by 3. The Ravens, 7.5-point home favorites over Carolina over the summer. Now 12.5-point point favorites when the lines came out 10 days in advance, and it remains again at 12 right now. This is a really interesting one. Philadelphia at Indianapolis. Over the summer, the Colts were 4-point home favorites over the Eagles.
Whoa.
A lot of hype on Indianapolis being a playoff team this year. Eagles, of course, had been a playoff team last year, and they were a hot team over the summer, both in talk of winning the NFC East, and even Super Bowl odds came down with the Eagles. And so far, notwithstanding Monday night's loss to excuse me, their game to Washington, they're still a very heavily and very popular team, very heavily favored team. But that line came up 10 days before the game, 9.5-point favorites. It's actually gone all the way down to 6.5 points right now. And I'm wondering, Marc and Victor, if that run by Matty Ryan for the Colts last week, the longest of his career, might just be the spark that propels the Colts onto a little short-term momentum. The coaching change that was very much criticized, not for the change, but for Jeff Saturday being named. They played very well last week, albeit it was against the struggling Raiders, but sometimes you can point to one play as turning a team's season around. Let's see how that works for the Colts in the weeks going forward. Rams at Saints. The Rams were 3-point road favorites over the summer. When the 10-day advance line came out, it was a pick. When Sunday's numbers were reposted, Saints were 1.5-point favorites. It's gone up to 4, but that's mostly because of the injury to Cooper Kupp that's going to keep him sidelined for at least a month since he was placed on the IR. Couple of more. Denver at home against the Raiders. Over the summer, Denver was a 4.5-point home favorite. Line kind of made sense. Everybody was high on the Broncos, and they thought the Raiders might repeat their playoff performance as a wild card from last year. What is surprising is when the line came out 10 days in advance of the game, Denver was still favored, but given the Raiders, who at that point were off the back-to-back losses at New Orleans and Jacksonville, Denver was just a 1.5-point home favorite in that game. When the line was reposted this Sunday after the Raiders lost to the Colts and the Broncos were competitive but came up short against Tennessee, Denver opened and remains a 2.5-point home favorite. Chargers hosting the Chiefs over the summer, and there was a lot of enthusiasm for the Chargers. This game was a pick'em. When the 10-day advance line came out, Chiefs were 5.5-point favorites. They reopened Sunday evening as 7-point road favorites, down a tick to 6.5. And I'll mention the Monday night game. That's the game that's being played in Mexico City. 49ers at Cardinals, their first meeting this year. Knowing, of course, that it was a neutral game, and knowing that Arizona had made the playoffs last year. Remember, they started 7-0 in 2020 before making the playoffs, but losing to, I think it was the Rams in their first game. 49ers were just a 1.5-point neutral site favorite over Arizona at the start, prior to the start of the season. When the line came out for the 10-day advance line, based upon what these teams had done, 49ers were 5.5-point favorites. After Sunday's action, they reopened as a 7.5-point, neutral site favorite, and they've been bet up to 8. So that's another line where we have basically a touchdown difference between what we thought of these teams in July, or what the bookmakers thought of these teams in July, Westgate specifically, and where these teams are now, what the sports books think of them, slightly more than halfway through the season.
That's a nice update, if you will, the look-ahead lines from Andy Iskoe in Las Vegas of what we're looking at this week, as opposed to what was posted earlier in the year and even as far as last week. So a lot of movement, to say the least, in the National Football League this week. We're visiting with Andy Iskoe from TheLogicalApproach.com, publisher of one of the finest football newsletters in the country. If you're not reading the newsletter, you're not winning. I advise you do just that. Log on at TheLogicalApproach.com and get yourself lined up for not only this football season, but get ready for the basketball season coming up ahead. Andy, with that, we're going to hop over to what you do best, your selections and your complimentary play on the football card this week, if you will.
Well, Mark, I think for the first time, this may be the first time ever that I'm going to go opposite a game that you had discussed, and that's the game between the Patriots and the Jets. And there are a lot of good reasons to support the Jets, and you mentioned many of them in your discussion of it. It's the second meeting this season in what has been a one-sided rivalry for many years. With their 22-17 win at the Jets in Week 8, Patriots have now won 19 of the last 21 meetings. The good news for the Jets is that they are coming off their bye week with extra time to prepare. The bad news for the Jets is that so are the Patriots coming off of their bye week. I've noted in the past New England coach Belichick and his longtime disdain for the Jets, which the aforementioned record also bears out. The time off allows both quarterbacks, Wilson of the Jets and Jones of the Patriots, to heal from nagging injuries. This might be normally a letdown spot for the Jets after their upset of Buffalo, but because of the bye week, it's allowed time for that euphoria to run its course. So I don't really consider it a letdown spot for the Jets as opposed to if they were playing the immediately next week. Both are 1-1 in the AFC East. A win here by New England completes a sweep and has a significant impact on both teams' chances of making the playoffs. The Jets have clearly been one of the biggest surprises of the season. The primary stats are fairly even between the two teams. The secondary stats do give a slight edge to the Jets, and the gap, I think, is closing between these longtime rivals. But until the Jets can finally get over that hump, I'm compelled to back the Pats with Belichick's preparation and coaching, a huge intangible edge against Robert Saleh, who I think is a fine coach and will have these Jets. But until they show that they can beat the Jets, and they had their chances in that first game, in running only 58 plays, they gained 387 yards, net yards against the gross yards against the Patriots. Patriots ran 75 plays and could only gain 288 yards, net yards against the Jets. So part of it was that the Jets got to the Patriots quarterback 6 times for 33 yards lost in sacks. Again, if this game were at the Jets, I'd probably be on that because I was looking for reasons to play the Jets. I just couldn't find them. If this line, which at one point was, I think, 4.5 or 5, I could make a better case for the Jets. But considering this line is -3 and you're basically just asking the Patriots to win and even by a field goal gets you a push, I'm compelled to play the Jets this week. And if the Jets win this game, all of a sudden it becomes 19-2 for New England. But the 2 will have been the most recent meeting.
At 19-2 still sounds pretty good, Andy.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. You do have to remember, though, that the 2 was the most recent effect. And, again, we're starting to look in the post-Brady era for the Patriots. But, again, and I don't know that's ever been fully explained why Belichick has had this long-time disdain for the Jets that dates back over his one day as head coach of the Jets.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe it's a Joe Namath thing. Who knows? But nonetheless, he does dominate this football team. This is in a price range that is very, very attractive for the New England Patriots. Andy, going with Bill Belichick against the whipping boys, the New York Jets, for his complimentary play on the show this week. Andy, once again, a great job on the show this week. I'm going to wish you the very best of luck this week. Let's hope the ball bounces your way. And we'll look forward to visiting with you next week, Thanksgiving week, here on Mark Lawrence Against the Spread.
It's always a pleasure, Mark. I wish you, Victor, all the listeners/viewers a successful week, and so as to not upset anyone, if the Patriots win by 3, well, we got to enjoy a competitive game, and neither of us suffers a loss.
And we have both had a couple of pretty good analysis on that football game.
Exactly.
Thanks again, Andy. Have a great week this week, and I'll catch you next week.
Thanks, guys.
That was Andy Iskoe joining us from Las Vegas as we got to check down what's going on in Vegas this particular week. Before I hop over to my awesome angle of the week, my good buddy Jim Feist from Las Vegas has got a complimentary play on the football card this week, and I know you're going to love it. Check it out next. Hey, Jim, what are you looking at this week?
Thanks, Mark. I have another underdog in the Big Ten this week. I'm going to go with Iowa. I'm going to take the 3 points. They're visiting Minnesota, and this is a big rivalry, and they're still both battling for the Big Ten championship. Well, not really. It's not going to end up that way, but on paper, that's the way it looks. Here's what we got. We've got a rushing team that can't throw the ball. That's Minnesota. And with their quarterback being hurt, that even makes it worse. Iowa comes in with a great defense, and that's the way I'm going with this. I'm going to take the points with the live underdog, the Iowa Hawkeyes. That's right, Iowa plus the 3 to win it all. Straight up.
Thanks once again, Jim. I like your selection side in your complimentary play, so much to the point that it's also going to match up with our awesome angle of the week this week. So I know our listeners out there are going to love this awesome angle. Let's find out what it's all about. We call it Ain't No Stopping Us Now. And what we're looking to do in our awesome angle this week is to plan any college football 6-4 team in game number 11 of the season that's coming off a win if they're taking on an opponent off a straight-up and ATS win. So these 6-4 football teams are bowl-eligible teams, game 11, 6-4, coming off a win, their opponent feeling pretty good about that winning cover they had the last game. By doing just this, these teams are 16-4 against the spread since 1980. That's a rock-solid 80% winning angle, and it comes to the Iowa Hawkeyes, the play that Jim Feist likes as well, for my awesome angle play on the football card this week. And with that, I'm going to hand off to Victor King from King Creole Sports to find out what Victor's complimentary play on the card is this week. And Victor, if you would, let our listeners know what you've got on tap this week as well.
Sure thing, Mark. First off, we can't go by without talking about our newsletter special. 3 for a quarter, all of this week's newsletters, all 3 of them, midweek alert, totals tip sheet, playbook newsletter for $25. Available at the playbooksports.com website. On page 2 of this week's newsletter, Mark pays musical tribute to his man, Johnny Cash, and I Walk the Line. And Mark, I don't know who did the write-up for the Georgia-Kentucky game, but it was hilarious. A very obscure reference to a cartoon character from my past named Snagglepuss and his Heavens to Murgatroyd that he always used to shout it out during the cartoons. I don't know who brought that one up, but that was a good one, Mark.
Well, Victor, I'll give you a little insight here, and so too will our listeners, and you're going to like knowing this, okay? We get a lot of help. We have 3 guys basically write the college football card every week from the notes that I pass along to them, pointing to the sides that we want to get to in the games. One of our writers is Dave Lamont. He used to be a broadcaster for ESPN and call the college football.
Yeah. Right.
Dave is very, very well written. You read his stuff here, you really, he gets inside of everything that he does, and he happened to do that Georgia game. So if our listeners are out there, check out his write-up on that big Georgia football game.
That's a good one, Mark. Now, before we get to our King Creole free play, as long as Andy was talking about the look-ahead lines, I was kind of curious what the Thanksgiving Day over-under lines would be in the NFL. And they just came out while we were doing the show here. And this is just for your own information. But guess who Detroit is hosting next week in that first Turkey Day game? The Buffalo Bills.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Buffalo has opened up as a 10-point road favorite in that game. Over underline 51.5. It's already gone up to 52.5. I wouldn't be surprised if it got into the range of 54 or 55 once we got a little closer to game day in that Buffalo-Detroit game. In the afternoon game, Dallas always hosts the late afternoon game on Turkey Day. They're favored by 6.5 points over division rival New York Giants with a low over-under line of 43 points, and Dallas has already been bet up to -7 in that game. In the night game, we got a really nice non-conference battle between the Patriots, who are heading to the Great White North and taking on the Minnesota Vikings indoors, with Minnesota favored by 3.5 and an over-under line of 43.5 in that particular game. So that's your Turkey Day look ahead in regards to the NFL. And let me punch up this week's Totals Tip Sheet newsletter so we can get to our free play of the week. And this one is pretty much a no-brainer. If you're not betting Denver Bronco over under the total these days, you are missing out big time, because Denver's the number one under team in all of football this year at 1-8 over under. They're only averaging 14.6 points per game on offense. They got a great defense who's averaging less than 17 points per game. And their average over-under margin in those 9 games has been a whopping minus 10.4 points per game. Their average line has been 42.6. Average score in Denver games, only 31.2. Now, the over-under line in this game is right at a key number as we speak. It opened up 42. It's down to 41.5. And folks, it's going to go down even more. So get in with me at that key number of 41.5. Again, I say that because 41 is a key number in the NFL. There are numerous scoring combinations that can result in a game finishing right on top of 41 points exactly. Popular scores like 34-7, 31-10, 28-13, 27-14, and 21-20. All those popular scoring combinations finish right at 41 points. So again, make sure you get a line that cashes a W just in case this one finishes right on top of 41 points. The Denver Raiders series, it's gone 3-9 to the under in the last 12 meetings. Not only that, but their second of the series season has gone 1-7 over under in the last 8 years. We talked about the Raiders last week. They are a respectable offensive team at home, averaging 28.3 points per game. But on the road, the Raiders have really struggled to score. We saw that a couple of weeks ago when they got shut out. Was it against New Orleans on the road, I believe? But they're only averaging 18.0 points per game on offense on the road this season. That is the Raiders. And as division road underdogs of less than a TD, they've gone 1-10 over under in the last 8 years. Average margin minus 9.8 points per game. So again, get in when you can. Make sure your line is 41.5 or less points. We're playing Denver and the Raiders under the total for your free play. And we'll have another big one in the NFL this week, Mark, a 4-star over of the week. We'll be putting it up at the playbooksports.com website as soon as we finish the podcast here on Wednesday afternoon. So you want to check that out as well. And as I understand it, someone's got a really big play in college football going this weekend.
That I do. Our listeners out there want to know. I just want to make sure that you caught that Vegas Denver under for complimentary play on the football card this week. And don't miss that big 4-star overplay. It'll be on this website at playbooksports.com after the podcast. You mentioned a big play this week, and I do have just that, Victor. It's my once-a-year 10-star college football play of the year. It's going to go this Saturday. Nice. And it's part of what I call a $99 10-star weekend of winners. Every college and NFL selection play I make from Saturday through Monday, including that big 10-star college football game of the year, just $99. Or better yet, join me for the rest of our 10-star November special. Get this week and next week, which will include our 5-star NFL game of the month on Turkey Shoot Weekend, all for just $1.49. To get on board, log on at playbooksports.com or give our office a call at 1-800-321-7777. Before I get to my complimentary play, just a quick note that our friends at mybookie.ag are once again offering a double first deposit bonus to anybody that logs on at mybookie.ag. Make that first deposit. Use the promo code Playbook and they'll give you a double first deposit bonus when you do just that. MyBookie.ag, promo code Playbook, to get your double first deposit bonus. Make that a priority for this particular weekend. Before I get to my complimentary play here, guys, I want to share with you, we're dedicating the show to my sister, who we mentioned at the top of the show, who passed. And I want to share with you, if I may, one of my favorite brother-sister talks that we had. It'd be a little tough for me to get through this, but I'm going to do it, okay? I remember when we were in Cleveland, Ohio, my sister worked with us for 20 years, and she was in charge of all of our newsstands, and she did a great job running that operation. It's just a fantastic worker, and even yet a better sister. So one day she comes into my office and she says, "Hey, I got to ask you a question." And I said, "What's up, sis?" And she said, "Well, as you know, we're having some problems at home." She's having marital problems, and I want your opinion. And I said, "Well, what's going on?" And she explained the situation to me, and it didn't sound like it was alarming to me. And while she was talking to me in my office, over to the side was the window in my office. And I looked over at the window, and I saw in the very corner of the window a little crack in the window. And I said to her, I says, "Look, Lorraine," I says, "listen, we're going to have problems in life, and we're going to have problems in marriages, but not everything is going to go perfect. And you see that window there? You don't have to tear down the whole wall and begin again. You can just replace the pane in the window and start new, and everything will be fresh again." And she got this big look on her face like, wow, I didn't even think of like that. And to this day, I feel like Ron Rivera here, Victor. To this day, she's happily married, and her and her husband are like peanut butter and jelly. So that's my little story that I wanted to pass along.
Beautiful, Mark. Absolutely.
Okay, guys, let me do this. Let me get to my complimentary play, where I'll be a little more in my wheelhouse if I met you, okay? On the football card this week, as far as the football card goes, I'm going to go to the National Football League side of things, and we're going to look at the Chicago Bears as an underdog in their football game against the Atlanta Falcons this week, and for a couple of reasons here. You take a look at the Chicago Bear football team. They've rushed the football now for 200 or more yards 5 games in a row. 6 times all year, but 5 games in a row. They're the only team in National Football League history to score 28 or more points 3 consecutive games and lose all 3 football games. This football team is flying really under the radar right now. They're being very well coached, and their quarterback is really coming into his own. Take a look at the Atlanta Falcons here. The last 8 times that they played teams out of the NFC North, they're just 1-7 to the spread. And as I mentioned before, early on, they're one of the phoniest teams in the NFL, the Falcons. They've outyarded only one of their 10 opponents this year, yet they're the number 2 seed if the playoffs were to begin in the NFC playoffs right now. Right now, they're on an 0-5 point or 0-4 point spread slide. That was after open 6-0 straight up and against the spread. But the law of averages and their play in the field has caught up to them. Take the points with the Chicago Bears for my complimentary play on the football card. That's going to put the final wraps in this edition of Mark Lawrence Against the Spread. I'm going to thank my beautiful sister, Lorraine, and also our good friend Victor King from King Creole Sports for a great job for gutting it out, Victor, doing one for the Gipper this particular week, and Iskoe from TheLogicalApproach.com in Las Vegas. And until next week, once again, this is Mark Lawrence reminding you to always to remember to bet with your head, not over it, and good luck as always.